Maceo Johnson, 38 years old, made a good living. As a process engineer for Anheuser-Busch in St. Louis, his salary was a solid $102,000 a year. It was a life built on precision, on understanding how systems worked, and on ensuring predictable outcomes. He applied the same logic to his personal life: steady savings, a well-maintained 2014 Honda Accord with 112,000 miles on it, and a clear plan for the future. The centerpiece of that plan, the ultimate expression of his love and responsibility, was laid out on the polished surface of their $3,200 acacia wood dining table in their Kirkwood home. It was a MetLife policy application. The death benefit was $800,000. He was filling in the last section, the beneficiary designation. His wife, Aria, was the sole beneficiary. It was the right thing to do, the responsible thing. It was what a husband did. He clicked the pen, a simple $2 bic, and admired her name, which he'd written in his neat, blocky print, Aria Johnson. His wife of 3 years. He loved her. He loved the way her laughter filled their 2-story, $450,000 house, a house he'd put 20% down on from his own savings. He loved the ambitious energy she brought into his quiet, ordered world. She was a freelance marketing consultant, and while her income was sporadic, her dreams were vast and dazzling. He felt a deep, abiding satisfaction in being the stable foundation upon which she could build those dreams. This policy, this $800,000 safety net, was the final girder in that foundation. He believed that if anything ever happened to him, she should be secure, free from worry. It was a belief so pure and simple it felt like a law of physics. He had no idea how wrong he was. The ink was still wet on the paper when he pushed his chair back, the scrape of wood on wood echoing in the quiet house. He just needed a glass of water before he signed the final page and sealed the envelope. He had no idea that this simple act of thirst would save his life. Have you ever felt so sure about something, so certain you were doing the right thing for the right reasons, only to have the world pulled out from under you in a single moment? It's a feeling that can break a person. But for some, it can also be the thing that shows them how strong they truly are. We're going to follow Maceo's journey, and if his story of quiet strength resonates with you, we'd be honored if you subscribe to Love Beyond Pride. The facade of their life was perfect, meticulously constructed and maintained. It was a life measured in weekend trips to Home Depot and the quiet hum of domesticity. Just 6 months prior, they had stood in the sprawling showroom of Restoration Hardware, the air smelling of expensive linen and wood polish. Aria had fallen in love with a sprawling, cream-colored sectional, the kind you sink into and never want to leave. "Oh, Mace, can you just picture it?" she'd said, her eyes wide. It would completely transform the living room. He'd looked at the price tag, $8,400. His mind, ever the engineer's, immediately calculated the hours of work, the percentage of his monthly take-home pay. He had suggested a perfectly good and nearly identical sofa from Crate and Barrel for $4,200. "But it's not the same," Aria had sighed, a familiar note of disappointment in her voice. This one is an investment in our home, in us." He had relented, transferring the money from his savings account. The sofa now dominated their living room, a plush, off-white monument to a compromise that had only gone one way. Their vehicles told a similar story. His 2014 Honda Accord was reliable, paid off, and invisible. It was a tool to get him from their quiet street in Kirkwood to the sprawling Anheuser-Busch brewery complex south of downtown. Aria drove a 2021 Lexus RX 350, a $45,000 luxury SUV that she leased for $680 a month, a payment that came out of their joint account which his salary primarily funded. On a Saturday afternoon in April, Maceo had spent 3 hours in the garage, his hands covered in grease, changing the oil and rotating the tires on her Lexus. He didn't mind. He found a quiet satisfaction in the work, in maintaining the expensive machine that kept his wife happy and safe. She had come out to the garage once, holding a $7 iced latte, dressed in a $250 Lululemon outfit for a yoga class she was heading to. "You're so good at this stuff," she'd said, pecking him on the cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. "I don't know what I'd do without you." He had beamed, his heart swelling with a simple provider's pride. He didn't notice the faint condescension in her tone, the way she framed his competence as a quaint, useful hobby. Their financial discussions were always the same. Maceo would bring up his 401k, showing her the steady growth of his $450,000 retirement fund. He wanted them to sit down, to plan, to align their goals. "That's great, honey," she would say, her eyes glazing over as he pointed to charts and expense ratios. "But we also have to live." Her idea of living involved a trip to Santorini she'd seen on Instagram, $12,000, a kitchen remodel with Carrara marble countertops, $35,000, and a membership to a private golf club, $20,000 initiation fee. Maceo, a man whose idea of a splurge was buying the name brand Oreos, would gently steer the conversation back to reality. "We can get there, Aria. We just need a plan, step by step." She would sigh, a cloud passing over her bright features. "You're always so practical. Sometimes a girl just wants to dream." What he didn't understand was that her dreams were not their dreams, they were hers, and he was simply the funding mechanism. The life he thought they were building together was, in her eyes, a starter kit, a temporary phase before the real thing began. He was the process, and she was waiting for the product. He just didn't know the product was his absence. It was Tuesday, 7:15 p.m. The signed insurance application sat waiting in its envelope on the dining room table. Maceo walked through the living room, past the $8,400 sofa, his worn leather slippers making no sound on the hardwood floors he'd installed himself. He was heading to the kitchen for that glass of water. The lights were low, and from the open-concept kitchen, he could hear Aria's voice, a low, conspiratorial murmur. He assumed she was on the phone with her mother. He stopped about 15 feet away, in the shadow of the archway between the dining and living spaces, not wanting to interrupt. And then he heard a name that made him pause. Chandra. It was Aria's best friend, a woman who always seemed to look at Maceo with a mixture of pity and appraisal. The sensory details of the moment would be burned into his memory forever. The low, incessant hum of the $2,800 Samsung smart refrigerator, the faint scent of the garlic and rosemary chicken they'd had for dinner, the precise geometric pattern of the Persian-style rug in the hallway, and Aria's voice, clear as a bell in the quiet house. "He's finally doing it," she said, and he could hear the smile in her words. A little thrill of pride went through him. She was happy about the insurance, happy that he was taking care of her. Then came the next words. The full $800,000. He's filling out the form right now. There was a pause. Maceo could faintly hear the tinny sound of Chandra's voice on the other end of the line. Then Aria laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. "I know, right? It's about time. But listen, I need to make sure you remember what I told you to tell me." Another pause. "Yes, the word." What was it again? Maceo's hand, reaching for the wall to steady himself, froze in midair. What word? What was she talking about? "Irrevocable," Aria said, pronouncing the word slowly, as if tasting it. "That's it. You're the best, Chan. I need to make sure he adds me as an irrevocable beneficiary." The word landed in the quiet space of the house with the force of a physical blow. Maceo knew what it meant. His mind? The engineer's mind. The mind that understood systems and clauses and fail-safes grasped the terrifying significance instantly. An irrevocable beneficiary could not be removed. Not without their written consent. It was a permanent designation, a lock. It meant that even if they divorced, even if she left him, she would remain the sole recipient of his $800,000 death benefit. It wasn't a safety net. It was a cage. Then came the phrase that shattered everything. "That way," Arya continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, laced with a chilling, triumphant glee. "He can't remove me later when he gets all sentimental or changes his mind. It's locked in. Forever." She was planning for a future where he might want to remove her. She was planning for a future without him, but with his money. The plan wasn't for their security. It was for her payday. Maceo felt the blood drain from his face. The air in his lungs turned to ice. He did not move. He did not breathe. He just stood there, a ghost in his own home, listening to his wife and her best friend strategize about how to trap him financially, how to ensure her claim on his life's value was permanent. He slowly, silently backed away. He retreated from the archway, his slippers whispering on the floor, each step a carefully controlled movement away from the woman in the kitchen. He returned to the dining room table, looked at the pen, at his signature on the application, and felt a cold, terrifying clarity settle over him. He had almost signed his own death warrant. The hardest part was walking back into the kitchen 10 minutes later. He had to force his feet to move, to carry him toward the source of the poison. He had to arrange his face into a mask of placid normalcy, a feat of engineering more complex than any process he managed at the brewery. Arya was leaning against the granite countertop, scrolling through her phone, a $100 iPhone 14 Pro. She glanced up as he entered, her smile bright and effortless. "There you are. I was wondering where you went." "Just had to take a call from work," Maceo said. The lie came out smoothly, coated in the mundane truth of his demanding job. It was the first of many. Something about a valve calibration on the third-floor lager tanks. He opened the refrigerator, the cold air a welcome shock to his skin, and grabbed a bottle of water. His hands were perfectly steady. Inside his heart was a jackhammer. "Oh, okay," she said, her attention already drifting back to her phone. "Did you finish the paperwork?" The question was casual, but now he heard the hidden layer, the sharp hook of her agenda concealed beneath the soft bait of domesticity. "Almost," he said, twisting the cap off the water bottle. He took a long, slow drink, buying himself a few seconds. Just got to the final signature page. My hand started cramping up, though, all that writing. He flexed his fingers dramatically. "I'll sign it in the morning before I head out. Want to make sure my signature is legible for the underwriters." It was a plausible excuse rooted in his meticulous nature, something she often teased him about. "Okay, honey," she said, not looking up. "Just don't forget, it's important." "I won't," he promised. "It's the most important thing." He said the words, his words, but now they tasted like ash in his mouth. He watched her for a moment, this beautiful woman who had shared his bed for 3 years, and saw a complete stranger. A predator who saw him not as a partner, but as a resource to be exploited. He felt a profound, arctic loneliness. He was no longer a husband protecting his wife. He was an operative behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence in his own home. That night he lay in their shared bed, in the king-sized frame that had cost them $2,500, and listened to the soft rhythm of her breathing. He stared into the darkness, his mind a whirring engine of calculations and questions. How long had she been planning this? What else had she been hiding? He felt a desperate urge to confront her, to scream the word irrevocable in her face. But his engineering mind, The part of him that valued data over drama held him back. An emotional outburst was a failed experiment. It yielded no useful information and only caused damage. He needed more data. He needed proof. And he had a suspicion where to find it. The next morning, Wednesday, was a masterclass in deception. He woke up at his usual 5:30 a.m., brewed the coffee, a local St. Louis blend from Caldi's that cost $18 a bag. He packed his lunch, a turkey sandwich on whole wheat, an apple, and a bag of pretzels. The familiar routine was his armor. When Aria came downstairs, wrapped in a $300 silk robe he'd bought for her birthday, she kissed him on the cheek. "Morning, babe. Did you sleep okay?" "Like a rock," he lied. He handed her a cup of coffee. "Big day at the plant. We're running a new hop profile for a seasonal brew. Don't forget the insurance form," she said, her voice light and breezy. "You can drop it in the mail on your way to work." "Right. The form." He feigned a sudden realization, snapping his fingers. "Shoot, I left it on my desk at work. I was reviewing it against my employee benefits package yesterday. I'll have to swing by the house at lunch to grab it." Another lie, seamlessly integrated into his established patterns. She wouldn't question him going to his office. She barely knew what he did there. "Okay," she said, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face, before being replaced by a smile. "Just get it done today, Mace, please." "Promise," he said, kissing her goodbye. The touch of his lips on her skin felt like a betrayal of himself. As he backed his Honda out of the driveway, he saw her standing in the doorway, waving. The perfect wife. The perfect facade. He drove not towards the brewery, but towards a Starbucks on Manchester Road. He needed a secure connection and a place to think. He had a plan. He was going to find out just how deep the rot went. The key to everything, Maceo knew, was in the cloud. Aria was careless with her digital security, a fact that had once been a source of mild concern for him, but was now his single greatest advantage. She used the same simple password for everything. And he knew it. Sitting in the corner of the bustling Starbucks, the air thick with the smell of burnt coffee and sugar, he opened his laptop, a 5-year-old Dell that was slow but reliable. He logged into iCloud using her credentials, her digital life loaded onto his screen, her photos, her notes, and most importantly, her messages. The blue and green bubbles of her iMessage history populated the screen, and his heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He felt like a trespasser, a voyeur. But the memory of her voice saying irrevocable burned away any guilt. This wasn't a violation of privacy, it was an act of survival. He clicked on the message thread with Chandra. The conversation from the previous night was right at the top. He scrolled up, his eyes scanning for the words that had changed his life. But what he found was worse than what he'd overheard. He found the planning. Chandra, 4:12 p.m. So is he doing the life insurance thing tonight? Aria, 4:13 p.m. Yep, he's got the forms. Mr. Responsible is finally getting responsible, LOL. Chandra, 4:14 p.m. Did you remember what I told you? The legal term? You have to make sure that's in there. Aria, 4:15 p.m. The irrevocable thing? Chandra, 4:15 p.m. Yes, irrevocable. Don't forget. That's the whole ball game, Ari. It means he can't change it, ever. Even if you two split. It protects your investment. Aria, 4:17 p.m. My investment. I like that. Okay, I'll make sure. He's so trusting he won't even read the fine print. He just sees my name and thinks he's being a good husband. Maceo had to close his eyes. He took a deep, shuddering breath. My investment. He wasn't a husband. He wasn't a partner. He was an asset, a portfolio to be managed and eventually liquidated. He felt a wave of nausea. He screenshot the entire exchange, his fingers moving with robotic precision. He saved the file to a secure flash drive he kept on his keychain. This was Exhibit A, but he didn't stop there. If they were this brazen yesterday, what else had they said? He began to scroll back, weeks turning into months. The screen became a timeline of his own deception 3 months ago. A conversation about his premarital condo in Lafayette Square, the one he owned outright before he'd even met her. Aria, I wish he'd just sell that condo. It's just sitting there. We could use that money for the kitchen remodel. Chandra, you know he sees that as his nest egg. Aria, it should be our nest egg. What's his is mine, right? That's how marriage works. Chandra, not for property owned before the wedding, girl. That's all his if you divorce. You better hope he adds your name to the deed. Aria, ugh, lawyers. Maceo's blood ran cold. The condo was his safety, his first major accomplishment, bought with years of careful saving when he was just 28. He kept it as a rental property, a piece of his old life. To her, it was just another pool of cash she felt entitled to. He kept scrolling. 6 months ago, a conversation during the week he had been sick with the flu. Aria, I'm so tired of playing nurse. He's so needy when he's sick, just a big baby. Chandra, at least he has good sick pay, lol. Aria, true. The golden goose can't stop laying, even with a fever. The golden goose. The nickname hit him like a punch to the gut. It was so casually cruel, so dismissive of his care, his work, his very being. He was just a source of money, a utility. He scrolled further, a man compelled to witness the full extent of his own ruin. He found them mocking his car, his clothes, his love for his job. They laughed about his $89 Timex watch, the one his late father had given him. They joked about how he still packed his own lunch every day. Every text was a small, sharp blade, methodically cutting away the last 3 years of his life, revealing them to be a hollow fraud. The final devastating blow came from a thread dated a year ago, just after their 2nd anniversary. Chandra, so is he still happy being Mr. Process Engineer? Aria, please. He loves his little job at the beer factory. It's boring as hell, but it's stable. He's a stable man, a good provider. Chandra, you sound like you're describing a workhorse. Aria, that's what he is. He provides. I create the life. It's a perfect arrangement. He will set me up, and then I can really start living. He will set me up, and then I can really start living. There it was. The entire philosophy laid bare. He wasn't the person she was living her life with. He was the person she was using to launch the life she actually wanted, a life that clearly didn't include him. He took a final screenshot, his face illuminated by the cold, white light of the screen. He felt strangely calm. The shock had burned away, leaving behind a hard, dense certainty. The grief and the anger would come later. Right now, there was only the clarity of the engineer. He had identified the system failure. He had gathered the data. Now, it was time to design the solution. The first step was simple, a single, decisive action. Maceo left the Starbucks and drove to a quiet side street overlooking Francis Park. At 9:47 a.m. on Wednesday, he pulled out his phone and called the 1-800 number for MetLife. When a polite customer service representative answered, Maceo's voice was even and professional. "Good morning," he said. "My name is Maceo Johnson. I submitted an application for a new term life policy yesterday, policy number 77B 45912. I need to cancel that application immediately." "Certainly, Mr. Johnson," the representative said. "May I ask the reason for the cancellation?" "My circumstances have changed unexpectedly," Maceo replied, the understatement of the century. "Please ensure the application is withdrawn and voided. I want a confirmation email sent to my personal address." "Of course, I've processed that for you now. The application is canceled. You'll receive the confirmation within the hour." "Thank you," Maceo said, and ended the call. He sat in his car for a moment, the silence broken only by the ticking of his turn signal, which he'd forgotten to turn off. One problem was solved. The $800,000 trap had been disarmed. But that was just the emergency brake. The entire engine of his life had to be rebuilt. His next call was to find an attorney. He didn't look for a cheap one. He searched for the best. He found a firm in Clayton, the county seat, with a reputation for being thorough, aggressive, and discreet. He made an appointment for the next day, Thursday at 2 p.m., with a senior partner named Evelyn Reed. Her online profile said she specialized in complex asset division. Her fee was listed at $750 per hour. Maceo didn't flinch. It was an investment in his own future. That afternoon, he went to his office at the brewery. He walked through the familiar scent of hops and fermenting yeast, a smell he'd always associated with comfort and purpose. Now it just felt like the backdrop to his broken life. He sat at his desk, surrounded by schematics of pasteurization units and bottling lines, and began to organize. He printed every screenshot of the text messages, his office printer humming quietly. He compiled them in chronological order, highlighting the most damning phrases. Irrevocable. My investment. The golden goose. He will set me up. He then gathered his financial documents. The deed to the Lafayette Square condo, clearly dated 2 years before his marriage. His 401k statements showing the balance on their wedding day versus the balance now. His personal bank statements from before the marriage. He was building a fortress of evidence, brick by painstaking brick. On Thursday, he met Evelyn Reed. She was a sharp, impeccably dressed black woman in her 50s with eyes that missed nothing. Her office, on the top floor of a glass tower in Clayton, offered a panoramic view of the city. Maceo, in his work clothes, khakis, and a polo shirt bearing a small Anheuser-Busch logo, felt out of place, but he didn't let it intimidate him. He sat across from her polished mahogany desk and laid out his story with the detached precision of an engineer explaining a system failure. He didn't rage or weep. He simply presented the data. He handed her the binder of printed text messages. She read through them in silence, her expression unreadable. After 10 minutes, she looked up, her gaze sharp. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice crisp, "this is one of the most clear-cut cases of premeditated financial intent I have ever seen. The irrevocable beneficiary conversation is damning. Her own words will be her undoing." "What are my options?" Maceo asked. "We file for dissolution of marriage immediately," she said, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "We file on grounds of irreconcilable differences, but we hold this evidence. When her attorney comes asking for alimony, the house, and half your retirement, we present them with this binder. It will completely neutralize any claims of hardship or partnership on her part. She was not a partner. She was a predator. The courts will see that." Evelyn outlined the plan. The Lafayette Square condo was his, untouchable. His pre-marriage 401k balance was his. They would have to split the marital assets, the equity in the Kirkwood house, and any joint savings. But Arya's flagrant deception would give them immense leverage. "She will not get a penny more than what the law absolutely requires," Evelyn stated, "and we will file tomorrow, Friday. We'll have her served at lunchtime." "Is there a place she frequents with this friend, Chandra?" Maceo thought for a moment. "Cafe Napoli, in Clayton. They go every other Friday. They love the visibility." A thin, cold smile touched Evelyn Reed's lips. "Perfect," she said. "A public setting is always so effective." Maceo left her office an hour later, a $5,000 retainer paid, feeling lighter than he had in days. The path forward was no longer a fog of pain and confusion. It was a clear, logical sequence of actions. It was a process, and Maceo Johnson was a master of the process. Friday morning was the performance of his life. The air in their Kirkwood home was thick with a strange tension, an unspoken question hanging between them. Arya was being unusually attentive, almost solicitous. She'd made him breakfast, his favorite, scrambled eggs with cheese and a side of bacon. It was a meal she hadn't cooked for him in over a year. She was checking on the status of her investment. "Did you remember to mail the form?" she asked, her voice sweet as she placed the plate in front of him. The plate was part of a $600 set from Williams-Sonoma she'd insisted they needed. "I did better," Maceo said, forcing himself to meet her eyes. "I dropped it off at the FedEx office yesterday afternoon. Sent it with priority overnight. They should have it this morning." The lie was perfect. It was proactive, responsible, exactly what she would expect from him. A visible wave of relief washed over her face. Her smile became genuine. "Oh, good. I'm so glad that's handled. It just makes me feel so secure, you know?" "I know," Maceo said, the words like gravel in his throat. "Your security is all I care about." He ate the breakfast she'd made for him, each bite a reminder of the depth of her betrayal. When it was time for him to leave for work, he kissed her goodbye at the door. It was a chaste, brief kiss. He could feel the coldness in him, a solid core of ice that no amount of feigned affection could melt. "Have a great lunch with Chandra," he said. "You deserve it." "I will," she chirped. "I'll see you tonight." "Okay," he said, turning away. He knew it was the last time he would ever say those words to her. As he drove away, he didn't look back. He drove to the brewery, parked his car, and walked into the building that had been the bedrock of his adult life. He went to his office and closed the door. At 11 a.m., he received a text from Evelyn Reed. "Petition filed with the court. Server is en route." Maceo looked at the schematics on his wall, the complex diagrams of pipes and valves, and for the first time in 3 days, he took a deep, steadying breath. The process was in motion. The consequences were now inevitable. At 1:30 p.m., in the sun-drenched, noisy dining room of Café Napoli, Arya and Chandra were laughing. 2 half-empty glasses of a $60 bottle of Sauvignon Blanc sat on their table. Arya was showing Chandra a picture on her phone of a villa in Santorini. "This is where we're going next year," she said, her voice full of excitement. "Maceo just has to sign off on the home equity line of credit." Chandra raised her glass. "2 investments that pay off," she said with a smirk. Just as they were about to clink their glasses, a man in a crisp, inexpensive suit approached their table. He was polite, but his presence was jarring in the upscale restaurant. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm and professional. "Are you Arya Johnson?" Arya looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" "You've been served," the man said simply. He placed a thick manila envelope on the table next to her plate of half-eaten calamari, which had cost $22. He turned and walked away without another word. A stunned silence fell over their table. The laughter died. The clatter of silverware and the murmur of conversation from the surrounding tables seemed to fade into a dull roar. Arya stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. Chandra's eyes were wide. "What is that?" she whispered. With trembling hands, Arya picked up the envelope and tore it open. She pulled out the sheaf of papers. Her eyes scanned the first page, her brow furrowed in confusion. Then her face went completely white. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed mask of horror. She read the words at the top of the page. "In the Circuit Court of St. Louis County, Missouri, petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner, Maceo Johnson. Respondent, Arya Johnson." She dropped the papers on the table as if they had burned her. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, no, no." She looked at Chandra, her eyes wild with panic and disbelief. He filed for divorce. Chandra stared at her, speechless. The entire restaurant, it seemed, was now watching them. The public humiliation, the sudden, brutal demolition of her perfectly curated life was happening in real time. Her investment hadn't just failed to pay off, it had just blown up in her face. The aftermath was a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of her own choices. The first wave was electronic. Arya's phone began to blow up Maceo's, a frantic, escalating barrage of calls and texts. He was in a late afternoon meeting, his phone on silent, watching the screen light up from the corner of his eye. He didn't answer. He let every call go to voicemail. Later that evening, sitting in the quiet of his Lafayette Square condo, his sanctuary, he listened to them. They were a perfect record of her emotional collapse. Voicemail 1, 1:45 p.m. Mace, what is this? I just got some papers. It has to be a mistake, a horrible, cruel joke. Call me back right now. Her voice was sharp with confusion and indignation. Voicemail 2, 2:10 p.m. Maceo, pick up the phone. How could you do this? After everything, you're just going to throw our marriage away without even talking to me? What is wrong with you? The confusion had curdled into anger. Voicemail 3, 3:30 p.m. Baby, please, I'm sorry. I don't know what I did, but whatever it is, we can fix it. I love you. Don't do this to us. Please, just call me. The anger had dissolved into pleading. Voicemail 4, 5 p.m. Sound of sobbing. I don't understand, I thought we were happy. I thought the insurance. I thought it meant we were secure. I'm at the house. Your clothes are gone. Where are you, please? I'm so scared. The pleading had given way to desperate, terrified tears. Maceo listened to them all, his face impassive. He felt nothing. The woman crying on the phone was a stranger to him, the architect of a lie. He saved the voicemails and forwarded them to Evelyn Reed. The legal consequences were swift and brutal. Arya hired a notoriously aggressive divorce attorney, a man known for tearing husbands apart on the stand. Their first move was a demand for temporary alimony of $4,000 a month, exclusive use of the Kirkwood house, and for Maceo to pay her $20,000 in legal fees. Evelyn Reed's response was a single, concise email to the opposing counsel. Attached to it was a PDF file. It contained every screenshot of the text messages between Arya and Chandra. The subject line read, Johnson vs. Johnson, Exhibit A. A week later, Arya's lawyer called Evelyn. The tone was dramatically different. The demand for alimony was dropped. The request for legal fees was dropped. They agreed to sell the house immediately and split the proceeds. Arya's leverage had evaporated the moment her lawyer read the words irrevocable and my investment. The financial fallout was a harsh lesson in mathematics. The Kirkwood house sold for $465,000. After paying off the remaining $340,000 mortgage and the realtor's commission, the net profit was just over $90,000. Arya's half was $45,000. Their joint savings account held $14,200. Her share was $7,100. Her total settlement came to $52,100. It was a respectable sum, but a universe away from the $800,000 she had been banking on. She received nothing from Maceo's $450,000 401k. She had no claim on his $380,000 condo. The golden goose was off the table. The social consequences were just as severe. Chandra was deposed by Evelyn Reed. Under oath, faced with her own text messages, her bravado crumbled. She admitted to the entire scheme. The friendship between her and Arya fractured under the weight of the legal pressure and mutual blame. Arya, stripped of her marital home and the lifestyle it afforded, was forced to rent a small one-bedroom apartment in Maplewood for $250 a month. Her $45,000 Lexus lease was now an impossible burden. She had to trade it in, taking a financial loss for a used Hyundai Elantra. The life she had been creating was revealed to be a stage set, and without Maceo's income as the foundation, it all came crashing down. She was left with nothing but the consequences of her own greed. 1 year later, sunlight streamed through the large floor-to-ceiling windows of Maceo's condo in Lafayette Square. The space, which had once been a simple rental unit, was now his home. He had sold the bland, generic furniture and replaced it with pieces that reflected his own taste. A sturdy oak table he'd found at a local artisan shop, a comfortable leather armchair that cost a reasonable $900, and shelves filled with books on engineering, history, and St. Louis architecture. The walls were adorned with framed blueprints of historic St. Louis buildings, a nod to his love for structure and design. The home was quiet, orderly, and entirely his. His life had found a new, more meaningful rhythm. He was still a process engineer at Anheuser-Busch, still finding satisfaction in the logic and precision of his work. But he had added a new dimension to his career. Twice a week, he mentored two young, aspiring engineers, a young man and woman from Harris Stowe State University, a local HBCU. He spent hours with them, not just teaching them about fluid dynamics and heat exchange, but talking to them about career planning, financial literacy, and the importance of building a life on a foundation of integrity. He saw his own youthful ambition in their eyes, and guiding them felt more rewarding than any promotion or pay raise ever had. He was building something that would last. He spent his weekends walking. He'd rediscovered the simple pleasure of exploring his city on foot. His favorite spot was Tower Grove Park, with its beautiful Victorian pavilions and winding paths. He'd walk for hours, listening to a podcast or just the sounds of the city, feeling the solid ground beneath his feet. He was no longer racing toward a future defined by someone else's desires. He was simply living moment by moment in a present he had secured for himself. His deep brown skin was luminous in the late afternoon light, and for the first time in years, the tension was gone from his shoulders. He learned that true wealth wasn't an $800,000 insurance policy or a luxury SUV. It wasn't a number in a bank account. True wealth was character. It was the quiet pride of a job well done, the deep satisfaction of helping someone else find their path, the peace of a home that was a true reflection of the self. Security, he now understood, isn't something someone else can give you. It's something you have to build within yourself, brick by brick, with honesty and hard work. An irrevocable beneficiary can be written on a piece of paper, but an irrevocable sense of self-worth is earned through living a life of purpose. That is a policy that can never be canceled. We all face moments that test our very foundation. Maceo's story is a powerful reminder that the most important asset we can ever protect is our own integrity. If you found inspiration in his journey from betrayal to self-reclamation, please consider subscribing to our channel, Love Beyond Pride. Your support helps us continue to share stories of strength, resilience, and the quiet triumph of character.